done more good for America? Is it Congress or the oil companies?
Our Fox panel is here to talk about that, including Peter Schiff, author of Crash Proof, Jordan Netburn of Axiom Capital Management, Terry Keenan from Fox News, and Victoria Barrett from Ford. So, Victoria, very simple question. Congress, oil companies, who's done more?
It's a simple question with a very complex answer. Look, if we're talking about recent events, I don't think Congress has done all that much, and they actually risk doing more harm than good. Oil companies have explored in very dangerous places. I mean, we take it for granted that these companies do take tremendous risks to increase oil production through exploration, and we thrive on oil. So I can't really answer your question, but I think the oil companies are getting a rough deal in Congress this week.
Jordan, the question is a little flawed, obviously, but we're oversimplifying a very complicated issue. But you talk about all the jobs that have been made by certainly by the oil companies, but the U.S. government is the largest employer of everybody here in the United States, and Congress has had something to do with creating those jobs. Do you look at it from that perspective or from a different angle?
I look at it from the perspective of I think there's been a big deficiency in probably the last 30, 40 years in that we haven't built any new refineries. So I think there's some cumulative problem here in this country in that we have to now import excess capacity. And we really need to examine what we have. International legislation kind of prohibits or is more accretive to stimulus and to drilling. And our legislation, I think in some points, borders on absurd, and I think we can't get near to our supply.
Well, Terry, the real crux of the issue that these guys are being drilled at, if you'll forgive the pun, down in Congress, was whether they deserve the tax breaks that they get for going. They say without these tax breaks, the foreigners would be even more in control than they already are.
Yeah, and you know, Russia's lowering taxes on its oil companies, and the oil companies, I mean, heaven forbid they make money. They're the only stocks besides the gold stocks and the metals that have been, and the basic materials that have been going up in the last 5 years. They just put Chevron back into the Dow Jones Industrial Average. I don't think that's ever happened before because it's making so much money. The oil companies are the biggest taxpayers, and you know, if people are worried that they're making too much money, look at the people on Wall Street that we've been bailing out.
Heaven forbid they use some of those hundreds of billions in profit to pay for their own exploration without using taxpayer dollars. That, I think, Peter, is something that people are looking at now and saying, we helped them for a long time. They're on sure footing now. How about shifting some of what was appropriate then to something that's more appropriate now, like engineering or technology?
Well, look, I mean, these companies are in business to make a profit for their shareholders. If anybody, is upset about that, they're free to buy the stock and share in the profits. But, when ExxonMobil, when they produce jobs, they do it out of their own revenues. They do it by providing Americans with a product that they badly need, petroleum. The Department of Energy doesn't produce one single barrel of oil, and when the government creates jobs, it does it by taxing us. It destroys jobs to create jobs. They destroy far more jobs than they actually create. But we need private enterprise. And look what's going on here with these hearings. I mean, Congress is in there making a big deal about what's happening in the housing market. Where were they 3 years ago, 4 years ago, when they could have done something about it? They didn't want to rain on the parade. They knew everybody was making money in these phony mortgages and the crazy home equity, but they didn't want to rain on the parade. The same way they didn't want to rain on the parade.
Victoria, you could get the best minds in the world to make very good explanations, as we've just heard being made, to defend the oil companies. And still, when a guy goes to the gas station, pumps up his tank, pays $60 for something that used to cost $40 or even $30, he wants somebody to blame. And he looks at these rich fat cats running the oil companies. He says, aha, there they are.
But at least there's oil there.
Yeah, but he'd be worse off if he was in Europe. I mean, oil prices are still higher over there. We've got a pretty good deal. And let's put these numbers into some context. We're talking about $18 billion in we're calling these subsidies. I mean, they were essentially incentives to encourage exploration years ago. So these are $18 billion over 10 years, so call that $2 billion a year. And the top oil producers made $125 billion in profits last year. I mean,
so
it is a drop in the bucket to them.
I mean, why do they need the drop in the bucket?
It's a drop in the bucket, but they're not making the CEOs of General Mills and Kellogg's go up on the hill and explain why cereal prices are going up because grain has doubled.
Or sports stars.
Because grain has doubled, or why my lattes are, $5. I sound like I live in the ivory tower. I shouldn't have said that. But,
Darn Starbucks.
But, lots of companies make much fatter better profit margins. And this is a capitalistic society. You want to see what could really hurt is these oil companies could just start taking themselves private and not invest any money in exploration, buy back their stock, and go up to $200 a share.
Absolutely. There's a depleting asset factor that goes on with oil right now. There's a huge raw secular story coming out of China, India, Russia, Vietnam, and there's tremendous global demand. So it's basic econ 101, supply and demand. Price is higher. Yes, these companies are pulling it down to the bottom line, but it is a capitalistic society.
But I say leave it to the free market. Then you get cars that are built that don't need oil to run on, and the next thing you know, you've got a whole different
It'll happen
sort of
eventually,
metric
but the price of producing alternatives is also rising. Inflation is rising the cost of all the alternatives to oil. So it's not that oil is getting more expensive. Our money is losing value.
All right. I venture this is not the last word on that subject, particularly as these hearings continue in Washington.
You have to say our money is of less value.
I know. Gold or money? Gold or money? It's in there. But we love...